Well, Dennis, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Appreciate it. And Houston SDTS, good show. You sit on the board, we sit on the board together.
Yeah, I've been coming to this since the inception 6 years ago. I've known Eric, he's been an innovative surgeon as we've developed our products over the years. Eric was always one of the first surgeons we'd call to give us advice and help us through a lab and such. And so it's great to kind of see some of his vision work through this conference as it's grown.
And those technologies come out of Sante Ventures?
Well, so before I was at Sante, I was an entrepreneur on my own, and gosh, most recently 15 years at Apollo Endosurgery, a company in the endoluminal surgical space, which of course is now finally very hot, but at the time was a pretty long slog. And Eric was really instrumental in some of the procedure development we did with a product called Oversitch. So but now have switched over, as my friends say, to the dark side of venture, and at Sante Ventures, which is early stage venture capital fund focused on life sciences.
Yeah. And are you finding the portfolio representing what's going on right now in medtech? Everything seems to lean towards digital, and you and I grew up in this. I'm 30 years in this, and we used to make devices and things, and I could put my hand on it.
Yeah, no, and Sante's been hardcore in devices, building, investing in those types of widgets and such, and we've also been traditionally pretty strong in biotech as well. And so I think the shift to digital, we've watched it, and I would say in healthcare, like a lot of things, we've been a little bit slow in the adoption of it, but of course now it's pervasive. And if you look purely on the health tech side, really just some spectacular successes on that. So we've been building our strengths in that area. Eager to make investments in the space. Still, we'll keep a focus on fundamental med tech and fundamental biotech, but can't ignore digital anymore.
Yeah, agreed. And I know a lot of people looking at digital on board on the device, right? So intelligent devices, whether it's a robot or a catheter that offers you information or predictive analytics on a sensor on a patient. But I'm getting curious that's a 510K PMA lift. And we know what that means on the clinical side. But there's a lot of low-hanging fruit on even things that are happening in the OR itself from workflow, and even just outside the OR in adding intelligence and information to the ecosystem. So
at this meeting, we've seen a lot of focus on intraoperative data and collection of intraoperative data, which is certainly interesting as we move surgical procedures to become open procedures to lap procedures to now robotic. We have access to a lot more information that we didn't have before. However, for us, our focus on data has really been on, well, what can you do from a value proposition standpoint with that? We made a recent investment in a company called Keela Health, and ironically did that with Intuitive Surgical. But that company's focused on aggregating perioperative data because that's some of the lower hanging fruit that can have a direct impact on patient complications before the patient even walks into the operating room. So, for us, I think, we take I don't want to say a cautious side necessarily, but, we put a really strong microscope on what is the business plan, what is the value proposition, and how does that data really unlock something?
Billy Cohen was just here a little while ago, and we were chatting about that. And Billy brought up an interesting point of how you present that data, interoperatively to a doc, and he or she is in the middle of something. And he likened it to, you've got a high performance sports car when you switch lanes and all of a sudden the steering wheel pulls you back or your seat rumbles and you just turn that sensor off. I just wonder if we're getting a little ahead of ourselves by informing the clinician, and we, as the inventors, think we know how they want to take that information in.
I think it's a great point. I mean, the military's dealt with for years an information overload of their pilots or command fielders, and the whole science around gathering information and then presenting data in ways that's actionable and not distractive is something I think we frankly need to learn within the surgical space as we do it, because otherwise, I mean, surgeons are likely just to switch off these things that we designed to help them. So I think Billy's got a really good point on that. That being said, though, I think we live in an immersive electronic world, and so I think we're getting used to having these electronic aids help us through things. But we just have to be a little more careful as we apply that in the field of surgery.
So I break these things down. We had telehealth here with a couple of telehealth companies, Nadine and Proximy, and these have come on really strong in the last 2 or 3 years. And the facilitation of data, whether it's telehealth, telementoring, informing the work teams as well. Is there enough focus put on the support teams and the support infrastructure outside the artist's hands?
That's a really good question, and I think there is some concern. I mean, all of us who've been living our Zoom lives lately. I mean, we can certainly accomplish a tremendous amount with remote access, and I think you look at what Proximy's done. Explorer's another one that's made great strides there, but you do lose something with that connection. So I think it's going to be really important as we deploy these technologies to really try to find: are we providing the right support from the nursing staff? Are we collecting the right information? Because there's a lot of other factors that, as we did a lot of early technology, I mean, you could sense stress and problems in a way that you may not be able to do on electronic remote end. And these are things we're going to have to learn. Mm-hmm. But those technologies are here to stay. And it's been really, I mean, COVID has been a very difficult time period for all of us, but I think it's really shown that the power of these technologies, which were all pre-COVID, have had tremendous value for us, even when the pandemic was going to go.
Agree. And your thoughts as an investor, a venture investor, we see the shift of sort of site of care getting out of the hospital, mm-hmm. going into ASCs, and then even going into the home right now. And I'm sure that you have people coming to you with some of the tech in the home and the monitoring in the home and the advisement out of the home, and mm-hmm. the ambulatory surgical center is the same thing. We had a fun panel this morning where we're talking about tech really matters in those ASCs because we're trying to increase efficiencies. Hospitals still haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So as an investor, do you keep your eyes on that entire continuum?
We do. I wouldn't say that we necessarily drive theses on that, other than, sometimes on our healthcare services side, we look for opportunities where we can take advantage of dislocations in that particular place. We do as it relates to our tech investments, whether it's the medical devices or even some of these tech-enabled services, that the entrepreneurs truly understand the implications of change of site of care has on their business plan. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, we'll get somebody will present to us a new technology opportunity that provides an opportunity to move that site of care, but when you dig into the economics, there are economic disincentives sometimes for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think having teams that are really aware of the impact of that move of the site of care to make sure that everybody's supportive of that move when it happens is something that teams miss a lot.
And this morning we talked about it in the M&M session about sometimes you're a little too early.
Yeah.
And that sounds like that could be a victim of that is eventually we are going to have to remove ourselves from that large structure in the middle of town, mm-hmm. where certainly really sick people should go. But some of these technologies that may do really well in the ASC or even at home might be a little too early for their time.
No, they could be too early, and sometimes the problem with early is, the world changes around you as we go. I mean, I don't think we could really have predicted, how remotely enabled we are today, and so I think that has the potential to impact technologies. Obviously regulatory environments, reimbursement environments, and accountable care organizations, and some of those shifts have made impacts on companies that haven't been aware. I think, like, for example, in robotics, I think robotics is, obviously a big focus of this meeting. I think the shifting sands have been more just on the competitive side. I mean, mm-hmm. just the sheer number of competitors that are in this space. At the dinner panel last night, I mean, Eric does a great job of asking controversial questions, and really the root of one of his questions is, why are there so many of you up here, and is there room for enough of you in the market? And the answer is no, right. But none of those companies really probably knew that when they started. So, mm-hmm. It's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves over time.
The number of robotic companies is amazing, and you're with Sante, you're in a venture with or in a co-investment with Intuitive. You look at that panel, and there's only one true culturally digital native large med tech company, and it's Intuitive. J&J mm-hmm. is not. Mm-hmm. Medtronic is not. Intuitive strikes me as a really interesting player, as a $5.5 billion free cash flow sitting mm-hmm. on the sidelines, and that company culturally was built around a digital domain. Mm-hmm. Do you forecast them getting a little more aggressive and getting outside of potentially Gary's, if it's not made here, it's not good, and expanding that footprint?
I mean, clearly, Intuitive has been signaling with their moves that they are looking outwards. I mean, the development of an independent venture fund, Oliver Cowan's running that, and I think that's a signal to the market that they are hungry and looking for ways to really expand beyond their core platforms. But I think the other big advantage they have, while the rest of the world is catching up with their hardware, they're able to kind of ride that hardware and focus on the digital piece. And so, that doesn't mean that these other companies are sitting still. I mean, what Verb has been doing on the digital side is pretty spectacular. And Medtronic's acquisition of Touch Surgery was very large acquisition that was meant to really try to help catch up some of that lead. But it's hard. I mean, I think Intuitive is going to be in the hospitals being able to sell to the CIO, where the other companies are still selling to the CFO, and I think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, when they've got enough plugs in the wall to have that, and we still are probably 24 to 36 months off from a soft tissue robot from either of those major players, most likely. So, and Intuitive won't be slowing down, but it'll be a fun ecosystem to watch.
The robot wars, we're all waiting. So.
Yeah, it's true. Anything else that we should be looking for over the next 24 months in health tech that you're especially going to be focused on?
Well, I think within health tech, we continue to focus on fundamentals of, tech. For us as early stage inventors, we tend to focus on things that tend to be more transformative. So we're always on the lookout for that next new idea. I mean, I think it's been a really good run for life sciences, and even with the pandemic, I mean, ventures remain very strong. There's a tremendous amount of capital out there for entrepreneurs to develop their dreams. I think there is some anxiety that the over-exuberance in the public markets isn't really sustainable. I mean, the SPAC craze that we've been all watching is, it's exciting, when you're in one, but how long is that going to continue to go, and will there be repercussions? I mean, I think any of us as entrepreneurs who lived through 2008, 2009, or even lived through the early 2000s and the crashes there. I mean, these things come, and how difficult funding can be at that time. So I think we're not slowing down our investments at all. We're still aggressively looking for things, but I think in the back of our minds we are thinking through, like, if there's a pause in the market, what does that mean? And for us, it means focusing on fundamentals, good solid valuations, but being realistic with that, and investing in teams and technologies that can make progress.
And before I let you go, one other question: that you talked about the money coming in. It's interesting that the money coming in from the non-med tech billion-dollar companies, and I think somebody on one of the panels said last night, don't underestimate or disrespect the FDA. Don't underestimate or disrespect clinical trials if you haven't done them before. And so there's some really deep pockets coming in that are driving up valuations, that are inflating free flow of money in the market. And I'm with you. I'm going to be curious to see how that plays out.
It's been a really amazing phenomenon for us. I mean, there are venture fund names that we've never seen in healthcare that are now leading deals, doing deals independent of kind of the traditional life science investors. And look, I mean, it's I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, certainly I think what tech has shown is the ability to turn large amounts of capital into scale, and to accelerate and transform markets in ways that we've never really done, frankly, in med tech. I mean, Auris was the first one to really do a multi-$100 million fundraise and then turn that into a $1 billion unicorn. So, I think that opened our eyes to the potential there, but Auris still did the basic blocking and tackling. I mean, Fred knew the FDA, he knew how to do these validations, and I worry that some of these companies that don't have that guidance from the board or don't have CEOs with that experience, you're going to have a lot of money to get yourself in a lot of trouble. And venture capitalists, I mean, we're institutional investors, we're professionals, we know it's okay, we lose money times, and that's all right, but sometimes we have a tendency to overreact on that as well, and I just hope that doesn't happen in this case, as the realities of our markets really become apparent to some of these groups.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for the time. It's good to see you guys.
Always good. Joe Mullings from SDTS in Houston. Be well.